Facebook now will be available after the end of the month on YouTube. Typically after the first of the month, I post the ones from the month before so that you can see them there. And next month, Lord willing, I'll do the book of Ecclesiastes, a 31-day study for the month of December. And one of the things that I have in mind for next year is reading through the entire Bible and recording it, so that you'll have, if you read 3 chapters a day, typically you'll be able to read through the entire Bible in a year. So that's what I have in mind to do, and that will take typically about 15 to 20 minutes a day of just listening. Mark doesn't know this yet, but he's going to be working with me on podcasts. We were talking about it a little bit, but I told him I'd have 1,000 questions for him, but so that you can, as if you don't hear my voice enough, but have a podcast that you can listen to the 3 chapters a day, and then I'll compile them into, if you want to listen to the entire book of Genesis in one shot, and Genesis will be there. So that's what I'm working on, Lord willing, for next year. They say if you want to hear God laugh, tell him what your plans are. But that does not mean that we should not have plans. And that's, I have been working very hard at learning how to read. Now, I have a high school education, I know how to read, but to be able to read out loud takes so that you don't sound like you're reading like this all of the time, and that you have some sort of voice inflection and it sounds like you're actually a human instead of a robot. You wouldn't listen long to that, would you? Well, you do, because you get robocalls all the time. But I have been studying the how to read out loud. So I'll be working on that you'll be the guinea pigs of it. You've been listening to me all along. We are in the book of Genesis. And we are up to Genesis chapter, let's go with chapter 29. We left off in chapter 28 in the last few verses where Jacob is making a vow. He's making sort of a half-hearted vow. In verse 20 of chapter 28, he says, "Then Jacob made a vow, saying, 'If God will be with me and will keep me in this way, I will go, and I will give him and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. Then the Lord shall be my God.'" So he's not quite convinced that the God of his father and the God of his grandfather, Abraham, because it's known as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, it's not quite yet the God of Jacob. Jacob has a journey that he has to make. Now, between chapters 29 and as we go on into verses 30 or chapter 38, there's going to be a period of about 20 years. 38 takes a little bit too far, but Jacob is going to spend about 20 or 21 years, depending on how you count it, as he's going to, originally in chapter 29, it says, beginning verse 1, "Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east." Now he is going, if you have your maps, he is going from Canaan, and he's going, you're looking at me from left to right, so he's going to go slightly to the east, but more to the north as he goes up to Haran, in the land of Padan Aram. But he still calls them the people of the east. And remember, if we went back to Genesis chapter 12, we're told that Abraham was called out of Ur of the Chaldees, which is in the far to the east. And he was called, but they go up to Haran, where they lived for a while. It may have been because the father was ill that they decided to stay there. He dies, but then Abraham takes Lot and Sarah, and they head to the south. So he calls them the people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it, for out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone at the well's mouth was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. So Jacob is about to meet Rachel. She is going to go to her father, and then he's going to make a deal. Let's see. Verse 15, we'll drop down to that. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak. What does that mean, that Leah's eyes were weak? Couldn't see good? Yeah, and so we have these that her eyes were weak, and then we have that some people believe that she wasn't all that good looking. She was rather handsome. You take your choice on this one. I've heard it both ways. I'm not going to tell you to believe one or the other. When it says her eyes were weak, it may have been a way of saying, as they say, I have a face for radio. Would you understand what I said about that if I said I had a face for radio? Not that good looking. So why is it that Laban thinks that Jacob is going to be a good fit for his daughters over anyone else in the area? He's got a lot of money, a lot of cows. Not yet. Remember, he's alone. He hasn't got it yet. He will. Because he's family. Exactly. Remember, he comes in and he meets the people of the east. And the people that have Laban, who has come from Ur of the Chaldees, comes to that, and he is really still considered a stranger and a foreigner, even after all these years that they have gone about. And it appears to be maybe 100 years or so that has taken place. But he's still a foreigner, and he still realizes that these people are, we may think of them as pagans, but we're going to discover later on that Laban says, when Jacob takes off with all of his wives and children, you've taken my gods. You've taken my household gods. So, some of that paganism has seeped into the family. So as it goes through here, we understand that Jacob has made a deal with Laban that he's going to serve 7 years for who? Rachel. But he's got a little bit of a surprise for him, doesn't he? And now, the name Jacob, as he came out of, means deceiver. That's what the name means, in a sense, deception. But now the deceiver becomes deceived in all this. So Jacob, verse 20, so Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed but a few days because of the love he had for her. Guys, we can relate to that, can't we? Guys, we can relate to that, can't we? When you're in love, time just seems to fly by like that, right? Yeah, okay, there we go. Well, there's the enthusiasm in that. And so Jacob knows what he's working for. And so it seems like it's just a few days. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place, and he made a great feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be a servant, and in the morning, behold, it was Leah, and Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? Laban said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Always read the fine print. Always read the fine print. The fine print giveth, and the fine print taketh away, as they say. So now he's got to work for another 7 years for Rachel, but he gives her after 1 week. So he actually gets her. So then as we go into the rest of chapter 29, they're going to begin to have children. We go into chapter 30. Can anybody name the 13 children that all of both his wives and their handmaids are going to have? Gad, Issachar, Reuben, Levi, Simeon, Joseph, Judah, Zebulun, Benjamin, Asher, Naphtali, Dan. And who is the only girl? Dinah. Okay, Leah has Dinah. And how did I know that one, Tim? How did I know how to? No, I mean, anybody know how I knew the 12? Paul Savage. Paul Savage came here, I believe, to Traverse City. He came to Gladwin. He actually came to Valparaiso years ago. And they had these little anagrams that you could memorize with that. And so it's Girls Jazz Band. And that's how you memorize them. You just use the anagram for that. So Reuben being the oldest, Benjamin's going to be the youngest. Dinah was born before Benjamin. So he's going to have the 12, and the 12 are going to become the patriarchs. And the patriarchs are what is going to be the tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. And in verse 25, we begin to talk about as soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go down to my home country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, that I may go. For you know the service that I have given you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will give it." Sound like a pretty good deal? Any employers willing to make that deal with some of their employees? Name your wages. Yeah. And but somehow or another, Laban says that I have found favor in your sight. If I have found favor, I have learned by divination. Somehow or another, it's been related to him that in one fashion or another, that it is because of Jacob that he has become prosperous. And knowing that, he does not want Jacob to leave, because as long as Jacob's there, he keeps getting wealthier and wealthier and more wealthiest to it. For you had little, verse 30, before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turn. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also? He said, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything if you will do this for me." And so he goes through a series of acts that he is going to do. They're going to have the spotted and mottled, speckled, depending, and striped, depending on what your version says, comes down. And no matter what, has anybody understood about the stripping the poplar branches in order for them to breed? Has anybody understood that? Because if you have, I would really like to know it. I have read a lot of material on this, and I don't know as I understand after I have read it. Some people have claimed they know exactly what's happening, but my sister, my family on my sister's side raise sheep. They don't do it that way. It's whatever. The bottom line is that whatever Jacob does, he becomes successful to it. Because isn't that the deal that he made? Isn't that the vow that he made with God? If I get through this, and I've got a lot, then you'll be my God. That's roughly what he's saying. If you give me everything I want, then you're going to be my God. Not too unlike what some people say today, much to their downfall. So they go through all of this, and no matter what Jacob does, and no matter what Laban does to Jacob, he just keeps getting more and more. And it's going to come to the point to where there's going to be some jealousy here. We come down to chapter 31. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, "Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has gained all this wealth." And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you." Okay? So Jacob sent and called Isaac. God does not appear very often to Isaac, very seldom. And to Jacob, God is going to appear several times, but here, in whatever form it was in verse 3 of chapter 31, he says, "Return to your land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you." So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where the flock was, and said to them, "I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father," did you catch that? He's still not convinced, even though God has done exactly what Jacob had prayed for. He has all of this wealth. He has all of these children. He has all of these wives. The God of my father has been with me. You know that I served your father with all my strength, yet your father cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob. I said, here I am. He said, lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen that all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise and go from this land and return to the land of your kindred. So God is dealing with him. Yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah. So he's convinced that because what God told him that he needs to leave there, and he's also convinced because of what is said in the first verse of chapter 31, is that the sons of Laban have determined that Jacob is stealing from their dad. Well, that's how they see it. It's not really how it's happening, because God has said that he's going to bless him. Verse 14. As we come down, we'll start verse 14. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. So Rachel and Leah realize what is happening. They understand it, that Jacob is not stealing from them, but that whatever belonged to their father, God has now blessed and put upon Jacob. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained in livestock and his possession that he had acquired in Padan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. Talk about that just for a moment, that she stole the household gods. What on earth is a household god? Who said it? It's idols. Some people believe that they were just small little figurines that he might have set up on the mantle, on the fireplace, and they bowed down to them. She stole them. Why on earth do you think she would steal them? I thought she knew. It's the culture that they are in. Joshua will say at the end of I believe in chapter 21, that the people that came out of Ur of Chaldees, they up to and including Abraham, bowed down and worshipped idols. So when we say that Abraham was absolutely spotless and flawless, that he knew that there was only one God and he worshipped him, is not true, because Joshua says that our fathers worshipped idols beyond the river. So this has somewhat stayed with them, and she is taking them. She thinks she's going to need them along the way. Yeah, it's a little memento from home. They didn't have a Hallmark store, so she couldn't order them online. So she has to take them from Dad. And Jacob tricked Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had and arose and crossed the Euphrates and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told to Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsman pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives to the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs and tambourine and lyre? See, Laban has redeemed himself. Don't you think? Was Laban going to let Jacob go? Laban knew what his meal ticket was. He knew that because of Jacob, he had gotten richer and richer. And he is saying this, I think is just sort of a ploy. And it's odd that he should say, why did you flee secretly and trick me? Isn't that odd that he should think that he was the one that was being tricked after all he had done? And Jacob says that he changed my wages 10 times. I think they're a match made in heaven, don't you think? Absolutely. Let's see. And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now that's a reasonable. I think that's a reasonable case to make. Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night. Notice this: the God of your father spoke to me last night. Why do you think he said the God of your father? Not your God, but the God of your father. He says that because Jacob hasn't really said that God is his God to him. Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And now you have gone away because you long greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your God shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours, and take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. This is one of those times that she's fortunate that she actually got away with it. It might have been better that she had been caught, but we don't know. So as they come on their way, and let's go down there. Verse 28. Verse 38. Pardon me. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was by day, the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from me from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. So again, he still is not convinced that God is his God, and it's really his downfall. But he's going to come to that conclusion eventually in just a couple of chapters. But when he says in verse 41, he says, "These 20 years that I've been in your house, I've served you 14, 6 for your flock." And he understands that the God of my father, the God of Abraham, had been with him. Now, in the next generation, Joseph has been born at this time. Benjamin is going to be the last one to be born, but he's not going to be born for a couple more chapters. Joseph is going to make an observation in the last chapter of the book of Genesis when he talks to his brothers. And he's going to make the observation that you meant it for bad, but God meant it for good. And how can we reconcile all of that in this when Jacob is willing to recognize that God was with them? What's the overarching principle that we use here, eventually with Joseph, and in our lives? What's the takeaway? Redemption. Yes, Romans chapter 8, verse 29, somewhere in there. All things happen for good, for those that God loves and are called according to his purpose. So we have to make up in our minds that we have been called, and we know that all people truly have been called. Whether they are going to answer the call is another business. But for those who have been called and answer the call, the things that God allows in our lives, we may think that people mean it for good, but we can actually see good that's going to come out of it. Now, That's a whole different theological discussion to have. Yes, because everybody will say, well, I've been called and I had a dream and I had a vision and I had this and I had that, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily with God. Yes, correct. We have caller ID, so we know that it's God that's calling us. Yeah. And so Jacob understands that God was with him for those 20 years. Now, we need to do, I promise, not a whole lot of genealogical, but let's say that in the 7th year that Jacob was there, his firstborn, Reuben, is born, because he gets Rachel and Leah as a wife after 7 years, and then it's assumed the next year she has it. And so, and then Joseph is born towards the end. So there's 14 years, roughly, between the birth of Reuben, who is the firstborn, and Joseph, who is the next to last born, and then Benjamin's going to be born a little bit later. That's going to be good to know, because when it tells us in chapter 37 that Joseph is 17 years old, how old is his oldest brother? He's 31. Okay? So we get an idea of, when you think, well, his brothers were older, then Joseph is going to spend another 22 years in there. He's going to be 39, which makes his oldest brother how old by the time they come to get the grain after the 7th? Yeah, so he's going to be 50. So we can begin to picture how old these people are as they go through, as we move through the chapters in Genesis. And trust me, Reuben is always going to be only 14 years older than Joseph. It's always going to be that way. It's that way in my family, and I'm sure it's that way in yours. So we get a glimpse of this. I have, let's see, when I had the 430 years, I had that handout a few weeks ago. Next week I'm going to hand out the Joseph as a type of Christ. So now we're going to move into chapter 32, and Jacob is on his way, and Jacob is going to have some encounters with the angels. Back up just a little bit, when Laban and Jacob have this vow that they go between them that everything's going to work out, and you're not going to cross over to me, and I'm not going to cross over to you. So chapter 32, Jacob went on his way, and the angel of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, the angels of God met him, and Jacob saw them. He said, "This is God's camp." So he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother. We'll stop right there. Why is it that you think that Jacob is shown these angels in that camp that he calls Mahanaim? We just make sort of a leap. Because God is protecting him. He's being shown this. We went back, when he first left, remember he had the dream, and that rock was under his head, and we related that to the song that says, "Unlike the prophet, my pillow is stone." God is showing him all along the way that he is with him. He's showing him all of these angels met him. So Jacob should be beginning to connect the dots. God has been with me. God has been with me. God is continuing to be with me. God is with me. He's showing him this constantly throughout this. And yet he keeps saying, the God of my father, the God of Abraham. He has to be convinced yet. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them. And this is the country which is basically east of the River Jordan. And Jacob sent messengers to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing him, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau," and that's a term of endearment. That's Mr. we would use today. It is the Hebrew word Adon. Lord Esau, "Thus says your servant Jacob." Notice the language that he's using. It's been over 20 years since he has taken not only his birthright, but his blessing as well. He's taken everything from him. And the thought that is on his mind is he's not quite sure how his brother is going to greet him. Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord in order that I may find favor in your sight. And the messenger turned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him. And Jacob is saying in his heart, good, it sounds like we're really going to have a great time. Probably a lot of partying and just probably, birthday cakes that we've missed over the years and a lot. You think that's what's on his mind? 400 of his men are with him. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, which he rightly should have been, considering, or not. He divided the people who were with him, the flocks and the herds and camels, into two camps, thinking, if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, and now here's the bargaining part. O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, as he looks up to him, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. But you said, he's still not quite there, and this is where faith really gets tested. And if I stopped right there and I fast forwarded to Matthew chapter 6, where God said, are you not much more important than these, O you of little faith? We'd have to say, we get in trouble. But remember you said that I was more important than them? Anybody bargained like that before? Don't say so lest we get struck by lightning here. So he wants to remind God of the fine print at the bottom of the contract. Remember you said that. It was in fine print, the little asterisk there, that you were going to take care of me. So he stayed there that night, and from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. These he handed over to his servants. Every drove by itself, and said to his servants, pass on ahead of me and put a space between drove and drove. He instructed the first, when Esau my brother meets you and asks you, to whom do you belong? Where are you going? And whose are these ahead of you? Then you shall say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau. And moreover, he is behind us. He likewise instructed the second and third of all who followed the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterwards I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. Jacob is extremely shrewd. He is not taking any chances. He sends all of these. I don't know. I suppose in my geeky sort of way, I could have went online and saw how much a ewe is selling for at the stock yards, how much a camel could sell for, all of these, and put a price on what he is sending on ahead. It's hard to put a price on that. But he is making sure that he can at least, especially when they say, and Jacob is behind us. Now, how far he is behind? He says, no, put a space between you and the next one that's ahead. So if you're Esau and you're seeing this company come, they may be coming over hills, and for as far as you can see, there are camels and sheep and donkeys and what have you that are coming. Would that make a good impression? I think it would. I think it would. He's doing everything he can, just in case. Remember, you said you're going to be with me. That same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and 11 children, and he crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on his hip socket, because he touched the sock of Jacob's hip and on the sinew of the thigh. And I have a little footnote in verse 28, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel." And my footnote says, Israel means he strives with God, or God strives. He has changed the name, just as he had changed the name of Abraham. And in the future, he's going to change the name of other of people that he has a special relationship with. And this is really a special covenant relationship that God has with him, because he's changing his name from deceiver to one who has overcome. The significance of this, I don't think, can be overstated, in that God has changed his name. And even Jacob realizes it, "For I have seen God face to face." If we go over to one of the minor prophets, it says that Jacob was left alone in verse 24. A man wrestled with him, but later in the prophets, I'm not sure if it's Amos or one of those, that says that it was God. It was the angel of the Lord. And the angel of the Lord typically means it is the pre-incarnate Christ. Joshua is going to meet the captain of the army when he is ready to go into the promised land, and Joshua bows down to him, and the angel does not tell him to rise up. Unlike we get to the book of Revelation, and the angel says, "Don't bow down, because I'm someone just like you." So we know that when someone bows down to an angel of the Lord, that it must be God. That's a conclusion, because if it's not if it's not the pre-incarnate Christ, as we call it, the angel will say, "Don't bow down to me, because I'm a servant just like you are." So it's a way of delineating that. So God has come down in the same way that God came down and visited Abraham before he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So God has come down and met him face to face, and has given him this new name. We'll not go to chapter 30. Any questions about this? It's a fascinating account here in the last part of chapter 32, where he wrestles with the angel of the Lord, and it tells us that he prevailed. And even more interesting than it says that the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because they touch the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. Interesting in that they have carried that forward, and I believe it's still enacted today, that they don't eat that part of the sinew of the socket. You don't either? If it's got fat there, I'm eating it. Since we're not held to that covenant, it's okay to eat that part of the hip socket if you want. If you don't want to, you don't have to. That we've had 2 bells? Well, and just a note, I saw a couple of weeks ago that Applebee's is closed on Sunday. Is that still true? Does anyone else notice that? So, were they? Well, okay. All I know is I saw it said closed Sundays. So we don't have to worry about beating people to Applebee's anymore. Okay, that was the second bell. Then we are dismissed.